as a temple during the time of Queen Cleopatra and the Greek pharaohs. So this could be the perfect place for Cleopatra's lost tomb.
In every corner of the world, the past whispers to us. It lingers not only in books or monuments, but also in the hidden soil.
It's definitely strange that just in the middle of the desert, there's just this random staircase.
In roots that twist around secrets too old to name. Civilizations rise and fall, leaving behind traces that time tries to bury. But sometimes, history refuses to stay silent. These echoes of the past can be faint, like a song fading in the distance, or they can roar back to life in sudden, shocking ways. Imagine walking through a jungle where sunlight barely touches the ground. The air feels heavy, alive with unseen voices. Every rustle of leaves, every distant call of an animal, reminds you that this land has existed far longer than your memory. In this story, the echoes of the past return not as gentle reminders, but as warnings. They speak through thunder that shakes the ground, through roots that tear open, and through a discovery that bends the line between life and death. What lies beneath the surface is not just history. It is something deliberately hidden, sealed away for reasons too grave to ignore. And when the earth finally reveals it, the past comes rushing back with a force that no one in the valley was prepared to face. The jungle's hidden heart deep within the jungle. Far from paths marked by men, there is a world untouched by time. Here, the trees rise like giants, their canopies weaving a roof so thick that sunlight struggles to break through. The ground is a maze of tangled vines, moss-covered stones, and roots that seem to breathe with the earth itself. Every sound echoes with mystery. The cry of a bird, the distant call of a monkey, the hiss of unseen creatures slithering through the undergrowth. This is the jungle's hidden heart, a place where silence is never truly empty, where the air hums with secrets of ages long gone. To the villagers, it was more than wilderness. It was sacred, a place they entered with caution and respect, but even they could not imagine what slept beneath its soil. For centuries, the heart of the jungle had guarded its secret patiently, cloaking it in layers of earth and shadow. No eyes had seen it, no hands had touched it. The trees above grew older, their roots twisting deeper into the ground, forming a living cage around what was buried below. Yet nature cannot hold its silence forever. The heart of the jungle was about to reveal its truth, not gently, but with a force that would shake both land and soul, tearing open the veil between past and present. A thunderclap in silence, the jungle had always been alive with its own music. The rustle of leaves, the hum of insects, the calls of distant birds. But on that day, a sudden silence fell over the valley, heavy and unnatural. The air itself seemed to pause, as if the world was holding its breath. Then it came. A single thunderclap, louder than any storm, roared across the jungle. It was not the sound of clouds colliding in the sky, but of the earth itself splitting open. The ground shook, roots twisted violently, and branches rattled as though struck by an unseen hand. The villagers froze, their eyes wide with fear, for this was no ordinary storm. This was something older, something deeper. The thunderclap was a warning, a cry from the heart of the land that something long hidden was about to awaken. Dust rose in clouds, mingling with the scent of wet soil and broken roots. Animals fled in panic, their cries piercing the stillness. For the first time in living memory, the jungle was not a protector, but a messenger. The thunder had spoken, and its voice carried the weight of centuries. What followed would change everything the villagers thought they knew about their home, their history, and the silence that now pressed down on their souls. The earth splits open beneath the towering trees. The ground shuddered again, more violently this time. Cracks stretched across the soil like dark veins, racing outward from the roots of the oldest tree in the valley. With a sound like stone tearing apart, the earth opened wide, splitting into a jagged wound that seemed to breathe. The villagers, drawn by fear and wonder, edged closer to the chasm, their hearts pounding as they peered into its depths. What they saw was unlike anything they had ever known. The roots of the ancient tree dangled helplessly, torn from the soil, twisting downward into the void as though recoiling from what lay below. Dust and fragments of stone drifted into the air, and the smell of damp earth mixed with something metallic, sharp, and strange. The chasm yawned deeper than their torches could reach, a scar cut into the heart of the jungle. For generations the tree had stood as a guardian, but now it was exposed, its secrets betrayed by the force of the earth itself. The villagers whispered prayers, unsure if they were looking at a natural disaster or something far older, far darker. The ground had not just broken, it had revealed. The jungle's silence deepened, as if waiting for them to take the next step. Roots of the ancient tree. The roots of the ancient tree stretched downward like veins of a giant heart, thick and gnarled, each one older than memory itself. They had once been anchors, drinking deep from the soil, feeding life to the colossal tree above. But now, torn and exposed, they looked less like protectors of the earth and more like unwilling witnesses to its secret. Some roots hung broken, swaying into the darkness of the pit. Others twisted violently apart, as though recoiling from what they had kept hidden for so long. To the villagers standing at the edge, it seemed as if the tree itself had felt fear, as if it had tried in vain to resist the splitting earth. Shadows clung to the tangled wood, casting strange shapes that seemed alive in the flickering light of their torches. The villagers spoke in hushed tones, their voices trembling. This was no ordinary tree. For countless seasons, it had stood as a sentinel, silent and unmoving, guarding something buried deep below. Now that its roots were laid bare, it was clear. The tree had been more than just life. It had been a shield. And with that shield torn open, the villagers understood that whatever had been hidden was never meant to be touched by human hands. Villagers faced the pit, the villagers gathered at the jagged edge of the chasm, their faces pale in the torchlight. The pit yawned before them, wide and black, its depths swallowing the light and giving nothing back. Fear and wonder battled in their eyes as they leaned forward, trying to pierce the darkness. Some clutched charms and whispered prayers, while others stood rigid, as though rooted to the ground by unseen hands. The jungle, usually alive with noise, had gone utterly still, as if it, too, was watching. The pit breathed a cold draft that brushed their skin, raising goosebumps and sending shivers down spines. It smelled of earth long sealed away, but beneath that was something sharper, metallic, and unsettling. The elders warned them to step back, their voices heavy with unease, but curiosity pulled stronger than caution. It was as though the pit itself beckoned them closer, its silence a voice they could not ignore. Children clung to their mothers, wide-eyed, while the strongest hunters exchanged uneasy glances, torn between fear and duty. At that moment, the villagers realized this was not just a crack in the earth. It was an invitation and a warning. To turn away would be safe. To step inside would change everything forever. The sealed chamber, torches in hand, the bravest of the villagers descended into the pit, their feet slipping on loose soil and fractured stone. The air grew colder with every step, heavy and stale, as if it had not been breathed for centuries. The walls closed in around them, lined with roots that twisted like skeletal fingers, reaching through the earth. Then they saw it, half buried beneath layers of dirt and stone. A structure, a chamber sealed by slabs of blackened rock, their surfaces smooth and cold, unlike anything shaped by nature. The slabs were not random, they were deliberate, arranged with precision and strength meant to last the ages. Time had not broken them, but now, revealed by the earth's violent tremor, they waited silently for the living to decide their fate. The villagers stood frozen, their torchlight flickering against the surface, shadows dancing across the stone as though alive. Each person felt the weight of its presence, a sense that what lay within had been meant to stay hidden. The chamber seemed less like a tomb and more like a warning, a door locked by hands long gone. Yet curiosity pressed on their hearts, stronger than fear. Slowly, cautiously, they reached out, fingers brushing the cold stone, knowing that once it was opened, there would be no return. Ere from another age, with straining arms and trembling hands, the villagers pushed against the blackened slabs. One by one, the heavy stones shifted, groaning like ancient voices protesting their release. Then, with a final heave, the last seal cracked open. At once, a breath of air escaped from the chamber, cold, metallic, and sharp, unlike anything they had ever known. It rushed over their skin like icy fingers, carrying with it the weight of centuries. The torches flickered violently, and for a moment it felt as though the pit itself exhaled, releasing a breath it had been holding for 900 years. The villagers recoiled, covering their noses against the strange scent, neither rot nor earth, but something far older, something unnatural. The silence that followed was heavier than before, as though even the jungle above waited to see what they had unleashed. Hearts pounded as the villagers stepped back, staring into the dark mouth of the chamber. They knew then that the air was not just a sign of age. It was a warning, a reminder that whatever had been locked away had endured for a reason. Yet their curiosity burned brighter than fear. Holding their torches high, they leaned forward to peer into the blackness, ready to face what history had tried to bury. Skeleton in strange armor, as the torchlight cut into the chamber, the villagers gasped. There, lying in silence, was a skeleton unlike any they had seen before. Its bones were not scattered or broken, but arranged with careful purpose. The figure lay as if waiting, its empty sockets staring upward through the dim glow. What froze their blood, however, was not the body itself, but the armor that cloaked it. This was no armor of wood, hide, or metal. It was made of bones, meticulously chosen, each piece fitted together with unsettling precision. Rib cages had become plates, spines layered into shields, and finger bones clasped like fastenings upon the figure's form. The sight was both horrifying and mesmerizing, a grim testament to a skill that spoke of ritual, not war. The skeleton's jaw hung slightly open, as though caught mid-breath, and for a heartbeat the villagers felt as though the figure might rise again. They had expected a relic, but what they saw was something more deliberate, more unnatural. Whispers filled the chamber as the villagers edged closer, their shadows crawling across the bone, white armor. It was not the image of a warrior to be honored, but of a sentinel meant to terrify. The air grew colder. Something about this guardian did not belong to the past. It belonged to the warning they had just broken open. The bone-made suit, the villagers stared in silence, their torches trembling in their hands as the figure's armor revealed its grim truth. This was no ordinary burial gift, no decoration of honor. The suit was a creation of bone, each piece carved and polished, then bound together with uncanny precision. Skulls, ribs, femurs, and finger bones were arranged in a pattern that was both grotesque and strangely elegant, as though crafted by hands that understood both anatomy and ritual. It was armor designed not for battle, but for meaning, its purpose lost to time, yet its presence heavy with dread. The bones glowed pale beneath the firelight, casting eerie shadows that danced along the chamber walls. Some villagers whispered that it was protection against spirits. Others feared it was a prison, built to hold something darker than the man it covered. Every joint, every curve, spoke of intention. None of it was random. It was as if the very dead had been assembled to guard the living. But who was the one who wore it? A warden, a warrior, or something far more terrifying? The silence around them thickened, pressing into their chests, and the villagers knew they were staring at a riddle the earth had kept sealed for nearly 1,000 years. A scroll of thorns clutched in the bony hand of the figure was something that silenced the whispers of the villagers. A scroll. Its surface was darkened with age, sealed with hardened wax that had not cracked in centuries. Twined around it were tiny thorns, sharp even after 900 years, piercing into the brittle parchment like a warning to any who dared touch it. The sight was chilling. Why would a scroll, fragile and delicate, be bound with barbs meant to wound? The villagers exchanged uneasy glances, torn between fear and fascination. This was no gift of knowledge freely given. It was a message locked away with pain, as though the very act of opening it would draw blood. The symbols etched into the wax were strange, not like the markings of any tribe they knew. They curled and twisted unnaturally, like living shapes frozen in time. Some villagers urged restraint, whispering that the scroll was cursed, while others insisted it carried answers to why this chamber had been sealed. The elder's voice shook as she warned them. Objects bound in thorns are not meant to be read. Yet the longer they stared at it, the stronger the pull became. Curiosity pressed on their minds, whispering that the scroll was not just history, it was waiting. Symbols of fear. When the wax was broken and the thorns carefully peeled away, the villagers unrolled the ancient scroll. At first, the markings were nothing but strange lines and curls, alien to every eye that gazed upon them. But as the firelight touched the parchment, something uncanny began to happen. The symbols shimmered, their edges glowing faintly red, as if written in fresh blood. They seemed to move, twisting and writhing like living things. Gasp echoed through the chamber as fear crept into every heart. These were not words meant to be read. They were warnings meant to be felt. The villagers could not understand their meaning, yet dread seeped into their bones. The strokes of the symbols pulsed with urgency, sharp and frantic, as though they had been scrawled in desperation by a trembling hand. Children clung to their parents, elders whispered prayers, and hunters gripped their spears tighter, though no weapon could fight against the unease filling the air. It was clear now that this scroll had been locked away for a reason. Every line, every glowing curve, carried a message stronger than language danger. The symbols were not knowledge to guide them, but fear preserved across centuries, fear that now stretched its hand into their present. The scroll awakens. As the villagers stared, the parchment shuddered in their hands. The glowing marks bled deeper into the fibers, spreading like veins of crimson across its surface. What had first appeared as symbols now seemed alive, shifting, reshaping themselves with every heartbeat. The scroll was no longer an object, but a presence breathing in the flicker of firelight. A gust of icy air swept through the chamber, though no wind should have reached that deep underground. Torches dimmed, their flames struggling as though smothered by unseen fingers. Some villagers dropped to their knees, clutching their chests as a heavy pressure filled the air, weighing down on their lungs. It was as if the scroll itself demanded to be acknowledged, its message no longer silent, but pulsing through the minds of all who watched. Shadows stretched unnaturally long, curling along the stone walls like claws. The elder's voice trembled as she whispered, "Et is awake." Yet no one dared move, for the scroll seemed to hear them, its lines crawling and writhing as though feeding on their fear. The villagers had thought they were uncovering history, but in truth they had broken a seal. And now, before their eyes, the past was no longer resting. It was rising. Whispers in the night. That night, the village did not sleep. The scroll lay at the center of the fire circle, its crimson symbols glowing faintly in the dark, casting a restless light over uneasy faces. Around it, the villagers huddled close, speaking in hushed tones, their voices trembling like dry leaves in the wind. Yet even when they fell silent, the night was not quiet. From the jungle came whispers, soft at first, like the murmur of leaves brushing together. But soon they grew sharper, clearer, as though words were being carried on the air. Men and women turned their heads, straining to listen, hearts racing with dread. No one could say where the voices came from. sometimes from the canopy above, sometimes from the earth itself. Even the children, usually lulled to sleep by the jungle's lullabies, clung to their mothers, eyes wide with fear. Every hoot of an owl sounded like a warning. Every crack of a branch echoed like a threat. Hunters swore they saw shadows move at the edge of the firelight, shapes too tall and too thin to be human. The whispers wove through the darkness, carrying no clear words, only dread. The jungle that once sang with life now spoke with fear, and the villagers knew something was listening. Dreams turned to nightmares. When the villagers finally closed their eyes, rest did not come. Instead, dreams twisted into horrors that felt too vivid to be illusions. Some saw shadowed figures moving between the trees, their eyes glowing like embers in the dark. Others dreamt of a vast shape rising from beneath the earth, its presence so heavy that even in sleep they struggled to breathe. Children woke screaming, their cries echoing through the huts, clutching at their parents as though chased by unseen hands. The elders, too, were shaken, whispering of visions they had never spoken aloud. Visions of fire, of rivers turning black, of the jungle consumed by silence. Every sleeper was touched, no one spared. The dreams came in waves, heavy and unrelenting, binding the entire village in the grip of something that reached into their very minds. By dawn, hollow eyes stared into the fading night, too afraid to sleep again. The line between dream and reality blurred, for when they looked into the shadows of the jungle, they saw shapes that matched what had haunted their rest. It was clear now. The scroll had not only awakened something buried in the earth. It had reached into their souls, turning peaceful dreams into a warning carved in terror. The dying tree. When morning came, the villagers gathered in the valley, hoping daylight would banish the fears of the night. But what they saw made their dread even deeper. The great tree that had stood for centuries, tall and proud above the jungle, now looked broken. Its once lush canopy was bare, every leaf gone as if stripped in a single night. The branches reached into the sky like twisted bones, lifeless and stark against the morning sun. At its base, the roots, once thick and strong, were brittle, curling inward as though drained of their strength. The villagers gasped, for this was no natural death. Trees do not wither in a single night. Something had taken its life. The air around it felt heavy, sour, carrying the faint scent of rot, though no decay was visible. Even the animals kept their distance, birds circling high above but refusing to land, monkeys howling from afar but never drawing near. The villagers bowed their heads, whispering prayers, but no words gave comfort. The tree had been their guardian, their symbol of endurance, and now it stood as a corpse. Its sudden death was not just a sign of change. It was proof. The scroll's awakening had already begun to bleed into the living world. Prophecy of the unnamed. As fear spread through the village, the eldest among them finally spoke. Her voice was cracked with age, yet heavy with the weight of memory. She told of a story passed down through generations, a tale so old most had thought it nothing but myth. It spoke of the unnamed, an ancient being of power, older than the jungle itself, bound beneath the earth in restless slumber. The prophecy warned that if its prison was disturbed, the balance of the world would tilt. The sky would darken, the earth would tremble, and dreams would turn to omens. The armor they had found was not the mark of a fallen hero but of a warden, one chosen to guard the pit and keep the unnamed sealed away. The scroll, the thorns, the symbols of blood. They were not records of history, but cries of warning left by those who had fought to contain the being. As the elders' words trembled in the firelight, silence gripped the villagers. Every sign they had seen, the thunder, the nightmares, the dying tree, fit the prophecy too perfectly. Their discovery was not a treasure of the past, but a key turned in a lock that should never have been touched. And now the unnamed was stirring. The warden revealed, the villagers turned their eyes back to the skeleton in bone, crafted armor, and for the first time they understood. This was no warrior honored in death. This was a sentinel, a warden chosen not to defend the living, but to guard the world from what lay beneath. Every piece of the armor, every rib, every skull, was not just a symbol of craft but a binding, a shield woven from death itself. The figure had not been entombed in reverence. It had been sacrificed to duty. Its role was eternal, to stand watch over the prison of the unnamed. The villagers shuddered as the realization sank in. The warden had failed, or perhaps its time had simply ended when the earth split open. Either way, the protection that had endured for centuries was broken. The empty sockets of the skull seemed to stare back at them, hollow yet accusing, as if asking why they had disturbed its rest. Fear rippled through the crowd, heavier than before, for they knew they had not uncovered a mystery. They had undone a safeguard. The scroll was no message to the future, but a plea from the past, desperate and unheeded. And now, with the warden's duty broken, nothing stood between them and the unnamed. The prison beneath earth, the elders' words lingered in their minds as they gazed into the pit. What they had thought was a burial ground was never meant to honor the dead. It was a prison carved into the heart of the jungle, sealed by stone, guarded by bone, and bound by fear. The black slabs were not doors but locks, holding back a presence too vast to comprehend. The armor, the scroll, even the thorns, all of it was part of the cage. Now, with their hands, the villagers had undone what countless generations before them had struggled to protect. A cold draught seeped from the pit, carrying with it whispers that were not of human tongue. The air grew thick, pressing against their chests, and the ground trembled faintly as though something deep below stirred in restless sleep. Hunters who prided themselves on courage gripped their spears tighter, but dared not step closer. Mothers clutched their children, while elders shook their heads in silent despair. This was not discovery, it was trespass. The jungle had not sheltered a relic of history, but had hidden a wound in the world, stitched shut by those who came before. And now, torn open, the prison waited, its silence more threatening than any roar. Signs of stirring power. Days passed, but peace never returned. The jungle itself began to change. Birds that once filled the air with song vanished, their silence more haunting than any cry. Animals that roamed freely now avoided the valley, circling wide as if sensing a sickness in the land. At night, the ground trembled in soft waves as though something deep below shifted in its sleep. The villagers saw shapes at the edge of their fires, tall, thin silhouettes that dissolved when approached, yet left footprints in the soil. Children woke screaming, saying they heard voices calling their names from the darkness. Even the river that cut through the valley began to darken, its once clear waters carrying a faint metallic taste, like blood in the mouth. Elders who remembered the prophecy wept, for each sign confirmed what they feared. The unnamed was stirring. It did not rise quickly or with fury, but slowly, patiently, like a storm building beneath the horizon.